or whatever it is.
Started.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, good morning. My name is Sam McGlynn, November Mike 5 November, and I'm going to give a little talk on cybersecurity for lessons for everybody. Kind of talk about threats, and really the main focus is on, well, what can you do about it? I recognize, you know, we've got all kind of different backgrounds, and not everybody's got a lot of understanding or experience with cybersecurity, and like, well, how's this applicable to me? If you're patient, we'll get to that, and we'll have opportunities to talk about some. Answer your questions, or if anybody has other ideas. I don't pretend to be an expert on everything cybersecurity, and I'm sure there's some other great ideas out there. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about, well, why are we here? I mean, what was kind of driving this? Talk about maybe some of the things you might have heard in the news, threats that you may have heard about, some techniques that the threat actors use. Talk about attack service, that concept, and how does it apply to us. So we really kind of think about attack service when you talk about organizations, enterprises, but that concept can also be useful when you're talking about cybersecurity for you. And then what really the main focus here is going to be like, well, what can we practically do about it? And then also want to point out some things, at least in Sam McGlynn's opinion, things that are really not as effective or maybe counterproductive. Talk about some resources, and we'll open up to discussion. So I don't have a slide on this, but let's go ahead and start with why we're here. And we've had a couple club members that at least have come to me and mentioned that they've had personal experiences with cybersecurity incidents that affect them or their businesses. And I'm sure probably like many of you, like I know personally, I've had things that affected me, and it would surprise me if most people have had at least some kind of experience with negative experience with cybersecurity, that incidents or malware or something that affected them. And so we'll have opportunity to kind of talk about that. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Paul. I think he was the first one that kind of came to me about something that happened. You want to share your experience?
Yeah, so we kind of figured out this timeline about 2019, maybe the fall. My lovely wife, who listens as well as a lot of wives listens to their husband rantings about things, went ahead and clicked on a link after she'd been warned many times not to. And things went along fine, but and she was telling me, oh yeah, I clicked on that, well, don't do that. Well, I clicked on that, well, don't do that. So lo and behold, one day she said, I can't get into my this or that. And they're opening various things, and I went up, and every time I clicked on anything, there was a text file. The text file gave me instructions on where to go to unlock my files. And then I started looking around. Sure enough, we had ransomware. We had been attacked by ransomware. About the same time, they had gotten in further into her stuff, got our credit card information, bank information, had been trying to charge stuff on credit cards. We got fairly close in front of it. I was able to shut them down, and thank goodness they did not. Their attack bot did not leave her computer. We're networked. I got a big, nice network in the house. I have a NAS drive where most of our stuff is. They didn't get to that. I unplugged her computer, air gapped it, shut everything else down. And then we went through the process. Of course, they sent me emails saying, pay this up. And I sent them emails with several words began with F, ended in K, that they didn't need. So I was after it, even with what I had, which was most of our data was on a NAS drive that was unaffected. I had to rebuild the computer completely, reinstall all of her stuff, and I had to. And of course, I wiped it. I did a low level format of our hard drive, hopefully to get everything off of it. And a low level format is more aggressive than the regular format that you would normally do. I was an IT guy. I had a little business for 25 years, so I was lucky that I knew some of that stuff, and I was able to do it. We had to get new checking account, new credit cards, and it took months to dig out of that. one of the things I did is I came to Sam and I said, here's what happened. What can I do? Because I knew he was in cybersecurity. And at that time, he was fairly new, and I just knew a little bit, like way out here. This guy, Sam, he has something to do with cybersecurity. So I sat down and he kindly let me pick his brain for 3 hours here one day on the things to do. And it was eye-opening and enlightening for me. And I had been in some of the cybersecurity. Eventually, we got everything working. We now, for our local computers, we use a YubiKey as part of our security system. My wife is now very good about it. And now that some of her accounts were damaged and everything, she's figured out that she does not click on links and emails, even though once in a while she'll say, well, this one's okay. And I've explained to her, you look at the header of who this is from or whatever, or hover over it and look to see where and Sam's going to probably tell you all about this, look to see where that link actually goes. Because it'll say Dillard's. Down at the bottom, it'll say nasty bad guys at Austria or Russia. And you're screwed. And she's finally figured some of that out. Sam will talk about that, but that's one of the main things you always do. If you're thinking about clicking on a link, hover over where the email's from. I get an email to my, I'm in an HOA and I'm the president. So I get an email once in a while that says, send money to, we need money for this. And some board member, I'll hover over it. It's got their name. You hover over it for a minute and it is, once again, badguy@IgotYou.com. You just have to do that. So we got out of it, but it takes months, and that's the bottom line. It takes months to get out of it. The other person who was supposed to speak is Steve, W5HK. His story is similar, except he believes that he got the virus that's all the way down to the firmware of his computers, which are viruses that claim they can do that now. He got it way worse than I did. I wish he were here to tell the story, but that was my story. The big takeaway is don't let it happen to you. Don't click on links. Don't follow anything. Don't respond to anybody you don't know. And if it looks really legitimate, use a different number that you have and call and say, hey, do you contact me over this? Is this something I need to pay attention to? And I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 times they'll go, absolutely not. And by the way, they don't care. You can't send them anything. They're not interested in finding the bad guys because they're too hard to track. Most of them are out of the country and are completely outside the law for us. So, but the big thing is call that company if you think that they're telling you owe money or whatever. You call and you talk to them, but never use an 800 number that they put in an email. That number is not going to work right. It's going to screw you over. That's about all I have. Thanks, Sam. And thank you, Sam, for helping me. You were invaluable to getting my systems back up and long-term security. We have not been, to my knowledge, hacked since. Yeah.
No, thanks, Paul. That's great story. I am going to touch on some of those points. I do want to mention, I don't have it in this presentation, but one thing that kind of happened to someone in my family is like, even with emails, I got an email from a cousin of mine, basically saying, check this out, or whatever. And it was her email. But what happened is she got hacked. And part of what happened is it automatically sent an email to everybody on her contact list. And some of those people clicked on that and then they got infected, right? Because they're taking advantage of this trust relationship. Like, well, I trust my cousin, right? They're not going to send me something bad, but it wasn't her. Because she was compromised to kind of leverage that. So, but to that point about even you get something weird, does it sound like something your family wouldn't send you or your friend would send you? Just call them, hey, did you mean to send me this? Is this what this is? And sometimes it's sometimes I get you get a link from somebody, just they don't provide any kind, they just, here's the link, and they really probably should provide a bit more hey, remember this, whatever, just so it's dissuade something. But if any question, just go ahead and contact them and say, hey, was this you? So now I'm going to talk about just kind of working from big to small, maybe some of the things you've heard about. Some of the major events, this is by no means like all the major events, but just maybe some that you've heard of. Back in 2010, the cyber attack disrupting the Iranian nuclear program. So on the spectrum of like cyber incidents, this is kind of one of those like kind of major stories of very targeted capability that had a real world impact, a non-kinetic impact that really had a major effect. Triton Trisis, this was in 2017. An attack on the Saudi petrochemical company. What was really insidious about this one was it actually was targeting the safety control systems on that plant. So the things that were designed to protect human life were the specific target of this attack. And had it been, I was actually at a cybersecurity talk. I sat next to the guy who was the incident responder, the Saudi incident responder who was dealing with that. The guy giving the talk was he's the head of a company that they went out there and actually dealt with this thing. And it says if there was just like one bit that was correct on that attack, it would have been affected. It would have killed people. There's no question about it. And that one was ultimately determined to be a source from Russian actors. They specifically identified like what institute in Russia was the source of this. Ukrainian electrical grid. So after the Russians invaded Ukraine in 2014, back in 2015, and again later, they identified Russian actors that basically they targeted the Ukrainian infrastructure and the part of their distribution network, and actually had the effect of shutting down power to big chunks of Ukraine, like hundreds of thousands of people were out of power. And again, the guy who gave the talk was there. He actually was the one that led the response to that. There was you can't find this anywhere, but he had on his computer, like literally, like I watched the video, you could see like the Russian actors that were remoted in, moving the mouse around on their screen and like trying to impact the grid. And what prevented from getting to work, the Ukrainian responders identified it and started disconnecting their building from the internet. So that actually prevented the attack from being even worse than it was. Back in, I believe this was 2015, there was this movie with Seth Rogen and who was the other guy? But basically it was about, they were kind of making fun of North Korea, like, I should remember the name of the movie, yeah. But what's that, The Interview. And apparently the North Koreans don't have a sense of humor. So they determined that they were going to do something about it. And they compromised the Sony Pictures Entertainment and leaked all kinds of like very sensitive stuff about like, you know, how executives were talking about, you know, their actors, and you know, all this sensitive stuff was coming up. So very embarrassing, cost a lot of money to clean up. The next one was one called NotPetya. So there was an original one called Petya, which was based on WannaCry, which I'll talk about later, which is ransomware. NotPetya was using a similar capability, but its actual target was Ukraine. They were trying to attack Ukraine, but apparently the Russians weren't very sophisticated about it. And it got out of Ukraine and affected all kinds of like logistics and shipping outside of Ukraine. And literally it was up to $10 billion in economic damage was resulted because it wasn't actually just ransomware like, hey, you know, send us some money or unlock it. It was actually destroying. It wasn't trying to just get money. It was actually just destroying all these computers. And like, you know, you had massive, I think Maersk, these massive shipping companies just had container ships that they couldn't control any of this stuff. So they basically were parked and they were moving stuff. So a huge amount of economic damage. Ransomware. So Paul mentioned like his experience with what they call ransomware. WannaCry was a big one. It was using, I think there was an exploit called Eternal Blue, which was supposedly identified to originated with the National Security Agency of the US. Somehow the capability got out, allegedly, was used here very effectively, and that became the word Petya, then also NotPetya. The target breach attack, where basically hackers got in and got hundreds of thousands of credit cards from target customers. So literally, you know, bad guys were using your credit card if you were a target customer. But that was kind of interesting too, because I think this was in the industry, this was a major incident because they literally fired the CEO of this, because like there was like, you know, there was stuff they should have done, they did not do, and so it actually had the impact. Resulting in a lot of studio losing its job. I've got a link at the bottom here. You can't see it, but I'll have this there. But there's like literally every single month there's a major cybersecurity incident that happened all over the world. And if you're kind of interested, you kind of dig in more about that. Just go back. So threat actors. When we talk about threat actors, the kind of, and this is kind of in not exactly, but more or less staggered in like capability, right? So the most sophisticated actors are, you know, your the foreign intelligence service. So ours, of course, is very sophisticated, and then the Chinese and the Russians and Iranians, they have their equivalent of that. Their goal is not so much destroy, but they want to go in and collect information for intelligence to support their nation's operational strategic objectives. Military funded teams, their goals are also more so about what effects they can have. So if you were maybe look at it from like what the Russians are doing against the Ukrainians, what the Ukrainians doing against the Russians, that would kind of fall into this category. But also kind of what's in this category is not just that, but like, you know, if you're say like the United Arab Emirates, where you may not have your own capability, you can hire mercenaries to kind of do the same thing if they've got actors that they want to go against. Criminals. So some of that might be what we've talked about here, but you know, these are people that have their goals to make money. They're targeting us, they're targeting small businesses, and then maybe don't have as much capabilities, or even medium-sized companies that aren't as sophisticated. Script kiddies, you know, these are, you know, your teenagers that have like they found some hacker forum and they want to do some cool stuff and impress their buddies. Activists, I have to think about activists that are using like a good example. This would be like Anonymous, right? So you might have heard about that maybe 5, 7, 6, 7 years ago. They're angry at somebody, they're going to hack them, the information. All right. So just a question here, which from a threat actor perspective, which one do you think we might care about the most of this group, right?
Cyber criminals or script kiddies.
Right. Yeah, cyber criminals, right? So that's kind of the major one that, you know, they've increasingly gotten more and more sophisticated. They're doing things like ransomware. Why? Because it works. You know, most people don't do things like have backups. So that was a great capability. If he had the ability, so even they got hacked, get backups. So that wasn't such a big deal. Most people don't do that. And if you've got some information like I've got to get back, enough people are going to pay them so that it's worth their while to keep doing it, right? On the bottom here, I've got this list. So we talk about threat. What is threat? So this comes out of my background coming from the military. We talk about threat and intelligence. This is the basic formula: capability plus hostile intent and opportunity. All those things come together. All of those things exist, and that's a threat to us, right? So, which of these things are, if we're trying to deal with these threats, which of these elements is something we can control? We can try to affect. Opportunity, exactly, right? I can't affect the adversary. What they want to do, they want to take our money, how capable they are, but I could make the opportunity for them to have the effect against us. I can minimize that, right? So this is an eye chart, and I don't expect you to look at this, but I've got a link if you want to dig into this deeper. This is something called the MITRE attack matrix. This is when you talk about the different, what's on the top here, you really can't see it, but it kind of goes from the stages of an attack, from reconnaissance, like how does an adversary find their targets, all the way through like how they get access, and then ultimately have the impact they're going to do. And each of these things that's on here is the technique that one of the categories of techniques they might use to achieve that objective: reconnaissance, access, execution, evading defenses, getting discovery, discovering what they're trying to get at, collect what they're trying to get at, get out, and have whatever impact they want. So this is from an enterprise perspective, but I could take a subset of this and say, all right, so they're going to be using different techniques against us. What is it that we can do as individuals or small businesses to do something about that? And again, if you want to dig into this deeper, it's at the bottom. There's a link. So the attack surface. This is a concept from a defender perspective, right? So think about how the adversary, a threat actor, would come at us, those access points that they might come at us. That's the enterprise's attack surface. You can also think about it for yourself. How is it that an adversary, a threat actor can try to impact us? So just a basic definition here, points in the boundary of the system or element or environment where an attacker can try to enter, cause, and affect or extract data from that system, element, or environment. This comes from the NIST standard 800-172. There's a couple of other definitions like this, but just kind of think about that as like, this is what's exposed. So the attack surface management it goes into the what can you do to identify, assess, and reduce those vulnerabilities to reduce your attack surface and minimize those risks. So this is what we're trying to do. So hopefully this provides a bit of context as to what we're going to talk about next. What is it that we can do? So I've got 2 slides here, but if you do most of these things, you can significantly reduce your risk. There's some of these things come from an Australian cyber defense organization, but if you do a few of these things, you basically eliminate 99% of the type of attacks that can affect you. So the basic one, obviously, probably people know about passwords. Use your password. A good number is if you try to get your password about 15 characters, you really have significantly made it harder. Length is actually more important than having, uppercase, lowercase, special characters. All that's fine, but if you can make it longer, that's actually mathematically stronger than a shorter password with more different characters. So try to get it longer. Avoid elements that someone might discover. So if I go on your Facebook and I see that your dog is named Fido and you were born wherever, a lot of people like to create a password that's based on things that you can remember. And a lot of that stuff is discoverable about you. So try not to do that. Don't reuse passwords between sites, especially with stuff that's sensitive, like your bank accounts, your things where your medical records are. If you do it with a ham radio thing, it's really not as critical. But if you take away anything from this, you really want to make sure that you don't reuse passwords, especially for sensitive things. Use the password manager. And a lot of people kind of get scared about that. They're like, well, now that's just one place that can get hacked. But there's actually, they've designed, I'll just say, but one I use this one called LastPass first. And they were very clever about how they designed it. It doesn't matter if they get hacked because they designed their system so that they never have the secret key. Like if you say, hey, I forgot my password LastPass, you're out of luck. So maybe you write that password down and you put it in your safe deposit box if you forgot it. But even if they get hacked and they can get that encrypted blob, there's no way that they actually have your master password. They designed it that way. It can be really useful for just remembering. I use it, you can put secure notes about stuff. I got to remember that's not a password, but something I want to record. You can archive all that stuff in there. They can also help you generate really strong passwords. So I probably have 1,000 passwords. I know maybe 2 of them, right? I know my master password, and if I forget it, there's a way I can recover that. It's actually really cool thing about some of these things that you can use it for estate management. So say for instance, that was something my folks mentioned. It's they're suggesting you use this thing where you can have a recovery thing where say something happens to you that your information can if you don't access it or someone requests access after whatever time frame you use 30 days, then that can pass to a spouse and then they can have access to all your stuff. So that's a really other good reason to let something like a password manager for managing all of your safe stuff that you want to protect as long as you can. And then if something happens to you, then that can go to somebody else.
Sam, what was the password manager that you?
LastPass. LASTPASS.
Oh,
So that has that feature. So basically, say something happens to you, your spouse can say request access, and then whatever time frame you said, if you don't respond within 7 days, 30 days, whatever, then they get access to all your stuff. So that's a really cool feature that specifically has.
There's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah, and there's other ones.
KeyPass.
KeyPass.
Was another good one. But now the commercial guys like Norton and all those have NordVPN has it.
The
all
big,
kinds of-
the big thing I would want to make sure is that they do not have access to your master password. Because if they do, and they get hacked, then you've got a problem, right? So that'd be the one criteria if you're looking at that and making sure if it's online password manager that they don't have it. But then you can use things like KeyPass that are like offline ones that, you know, that's not the same issue. Two-factor authentication, this is something that Paul mentioned. YubiKey, like you've got yours, I've got mine. This is what they call a like a hardware type second factor. Effectively, this looks like a USB drive. What it really is with the computer, what this computer sees is this is like a keyboard. And has the ability to generate a very long key that basically becomes that second factor that helps you authenticate. And you can use this is something a bad guy cannot have, right? There's no ability for them to get this short of, you know, knocking you over the head, right? So don't let that happen. But this is a very good solution. Another really good one that's free and very good is Google Authenticator. You can get that for your iPhone. You can get it for Android. It is free. If your accounts allow you to set up second factor authentication, please set that up, especially for sensitive stuff like your bank, your medical stuff you really care about. If they offer second factor, please do that. This is something that's easy and it makes the bad guys' task so much harder, and they would go on to the next guy. So please do this. This is like major foot down, easy to do, makes your security far better. Some places will offer like SMS text as an option to say, well, we'll text you, you know, your second code. If that's the only option, by all means do that. But if they give you another option, do that, because SMS, there are ways, like what bad guys have done is what they do is there's an attack basically where an adversary could call your phone company and says, hey, I'm Sam McGlynn, you know, your name. I want to move my phone number over somewhere else. And they can they call it social, they can convince your phone company that you are, that they're you, move your phone number somewhere else. And then when they try to access, then they get the text instead of you. That has happened. And so that's why texting is not as good an option as something else. But if that's all that's available, do that. That's better than nothing. Update your operating systems and software in a timely manner. So what will happen is, well, why is that important? Because what happens every time, like Windows will come up with an update or your software that you use is updating. The bad guys, the first thing they do is they take that update, reverse engineer what changed, and then basically within hours they can create an attack that exploits that update, right? And so they're counting on, you know, people and small businesses like, well, whenever I get around to. So there's a window of time when that update goes up that that you can do something to kind of patch that. So if you just do that, you make sure you're updating your operating system and your software as soon as you really, as you can, you really minimize that window where an adversary can affect you, negatively affect you.
So what you're saying there is when that patch comes out, it exposes whatever vulnerabilities that the company had discovered in their software. And when they reverse engineer it, then the bad guys know what those vulnerabilities are. And then they go into the unupdated computers and they can hack in.
Right, so basically, because they can see what the software looked like before, and they can see what this patch is, and then they can do like a you know, what changed. And they can look at that, and if that, they can determine, oh, that was a security update. Then they can create an exploit that based on that.
That will go into the unpatched computer.
Right. They can use that to either access or escalate privileges, or, you know, any type of, like, you saw that MITRE ATT&CK matrix, like one of those stages can aid it in them being able to have the ultimate effect that they're trying to against you. So, all right. Next is, and so like an easy way to do that is they offer automatic updates. That's the easy way to do it. Just allow automatic updates. Sometimes that's not convenient. So do you have a question?
Well, what about that Windows update that came out and crashed everybody yesterday?
Well, that's a good question. I honestly, I don't have enough information about it to really kind of comment. I think it affected me because actually this computer, last night as I was working on this, I pulled this up. I got that BitLocker screen because I've got the Pro version and I've got BitLocker on. This is, hey, there was an update. You need to put your BitLocker key in there. Well, where did I find my BitLocker key? Out of my password manager, right? Another foot stop for password managers, keep sensitive information secure. But I had that, and I worry about those people that didn't have that, right? Or they don't know where they kept it. Because they basically lost access to their computer, or the company that has, all of their whole enterprise that they can't have access. But unfortunately, I don't have enough information. I think it just happened, and it's probably going to be a few days before we really kind of get to the bottom line of what happened. What I've heard about the Microsoft issue is that it was actually two things. There was an issue with Azure, their Azure cloud, but also at the same time, they apparently were a client of CrowdStrike, and there was apparently a bad software update where what sounds like initial, they say initial reports are always wrong. But the initial report is that CrowdStrike, they're in their security software of all things. They pushed an update that was not well tested. And that had the effect of basically making all of these computers unavailable. I may have heard that there may be a fix for that, but I don't have the latest on that. But yeah, so that's a good example of that. I wouldn't say like that's in a whole. I didn't really get into it in this presentation, but there's a whole nother category of threats of like unintended events, self-inflicted issues, right? The stupid human tricks. So like someone made a mistake, it happens. So it's good to have things like backups. Right? There's things you can do. Never click on links in unexpected emails or texts. Thank you, Paul. I really made a big point about that. People think of like emails as like how big a deal are these? Is this really like a major cybersecurity threat? It really is. Even for enterprises, email has the possibility of circumventing so many security measures, because like a lot of security, when you think about it, is meant to kind of keep things out, right? Blocking accesses for a bad guy to come at you. But when you get an email with the link, effectively, it's not them coming from the outside. It's like you reaching out to like, give me some of that bad stuff. So if you're not careful when you click on the link, then basically you're making yourself or your enterprise or your company super vulnerable. But really good point. Just if you get an email that you're not expecting, that's the first thing. I got an email. It's one thing if it's like, it's like your bank or you were expecting an email. And even then you really want to kind of look, make sure it's not someone pretending to be someone you're not. You could do the thing where you kind of mouse over the link and say, does the domain. Sometimes it's not as effective because it could just be a bunch of gobbledygook. This doesn't necessarily mean it's malicious, but it can be another thing. Like, but I would be really careful if I have something that's, saw a link that says a domain that's in Eastern Europe or .cn or .ru. It's like, I've got no business with the Russians. I got no business with the Chinese. There's no reason why I would ever click on it. So just be careful. That's really important. Also, sometimes with text, and kind of on a related thing, one thing that like I'm starting to get, I get these text messages from like I would what they would call like a social engineering attack. Like someone said, "Hey, are you coming over?" It's like, "Well, who are you?" And it's like, "Oh, it's the wrong person." It's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm so and so from California, and there's a really picture of a very pretty person, very woman." So, that's just another way they can maybe get you like maybe trust them a little bit. Then they send you a link, you click on it, and now you've got another bill. All right, more actions you can take. Some of these things are maybe not as straightforward as the first ones, but this is a really, really big one. If you can do this, it's really not that hard. Like most of us have got like Windows machines. When you get it, you start up Windows, you log in the first time, your level of what they call privilege, you are effectively an administrator on that system. And that's great because you can use that like, okay, now I got a Windows system, what I want to do. I want to put some software, I want to play some games, or whatever you want to do. I want to do some business. I want to install some ham radio software. And that's fine, and that's convenient, but that's not secure. But what you can do is you can create a new account. You can log in your settings, you create a new account. That's the one that you log into. You create an admin account, and then you only with its own separate password, and you only use that. You log in with that admin account only when you want to install something. And then once you've done that, you go back, modify your existing account, my Sam and Glenn account, and I'm gonna change it from an admin account to a user account. And just by doing that, so what happens when you stumble across a bad website with malware on it, maybe it was a good website, they got compromised, you visit your website, you always do. And because you visited that website, you've got a drive-by attack, call it drive-by attack. And when it tries to use the privileges that you have as an admin, you don't have it, right? By doing this, you basically effectively stop that attack from being able to affect your system. Backups. Paul, well, saved his bacon. The one he could give the one-finger salute to those bad guys because like, hey, I got backups. I don't care, right? So you can implement automatic backups, and that defeats a lot of ransomware, right? So when the worst happens, you get ransomware, you got backups. If you're a company with backups, it's not that big a deal. You just revert back to your backup that you know is good, and then you're all set. One thing I use Dropbox for cloud storage, but I pay a little bit more to have like versioning. So like, say my backups to Dropbox get encrypted, I've got previous versions that are saved of my critical documents that I can revert back to, even if those most current version is compromised. So if you use Dropbox as an option, you can pay a little bit more. Limiting your digital footprint. So remember that MITRE ATT&CK matrix, the very first thing on the left was reconnaissance. So just when we're out there, like every machine has got, so many different types of trackers. There's ad trackers, there's all these kind of scripts that are running in the background there and putting these cookies on your systems, and all that stuff it's all getting collected by these data aggregation companies, and it's for sale for anybody who's got the money. Well, the bad guys got money too, right? And they can use that to find you. So if you can reduce your do things like use script blockers, like NoScript or some other ones, and they're not convenient, but if you do that by default, you can help to limit your what's out there. I'm not saying all this is super easy, but these are all doable things, right? We can talk more about this. This isn't strictly like this last one isn't. It's kind of cybersecurity, but identity theft. So if your stuff gets out there, your information gets out there, bad guys can go and try to create accounts in your name. But if you just do this credit freeze, then you made it far harder. Basically, you can create these pins or passwords on your accounts where you have to open up your credit so that like when you need credit or someone wants to check you for like references, if you're going to rent something and you unfreeze it, it does it. This isn't well advertised. Why? Because no one's making money here. This is something that's available to you for free. You don't have to pay for it. But there's other, I'm going to get into, there's the next slide, we kind of get into like what's out there, people paying money for things you don't need to pay for. But if you just do this simple act, you can make things easier from you from a identity theft perspective. Say they get your social security number, your birthday, and all this, they try to create accounts. This defeats that. Free. And it's available for all the major credit bureaus. So not effective, counterproductive, and this is really an open discussion. This is my understanding. I picked up a few nuggets here. Maybe some other folks have some other ideas about this. Third-party antivirus software. So like a lot of people will put like Norton on there, like, oh, I'm doing a good thing. I'm adding antivirus to my system. Well, what have you really done? You put another piece of software on your system that wasn't there before. And what's like every software that's out there is something that can be compromised. And I think at the beginning, if you go back, decades, it was a really good idea to have antivirus software because Microsoft, it wasn't really that important. If it had antivirus built into Windows, then it wasn't that effective. So at that time, it was probably a smart thing to do to McAfee and all this stuff. But if you're at home and there's something called Microsoft Defender, which is built into Windows, if you just use that, it's probably going to be effective better than any kind of antivirus that you're going to pay. And you can save that money. You don't need it, right? So bad guys can go in, they can target. What happens is if you install some other antivirus software, the bad guys go after the antivirus software. And so now your antivirus software becomes the platform for the bad guys to affect you as well. So a big thing with principle with cybersecurity is less is more, right? The less you have, the less that can be affected, right? So if you kind of use that principle, less is more. Saving sensitive passwords in your browser. So like a lot of browsers say, hey, do you want to save this password? Well, if it's for something like ham radio, yeah, sure, fine, I don't care. Right? If it got compromised, no big deal. But if you're logging in with your bank or medical stuff, you save your password in the browser, don't do it. Right? Why? Because a bad guy that can get on your system can extract those passwords out of your browser. And now they've got it. They've got your passwords. So don't do that. Identity monitoring subscriptions, like Life360 or some of the, a lot of that, you know, if you just had locked your credit, if you just had frozen your credit, then you don't need it because your credit cannot be, no one can get they can't create new accounts because your credit is frozen and you need to manually unfreeze it. So really look hard about that. And I'm not meaning this to be like the end all be all list, and maybe other people have other opinions. These are my opinions. Okay. Yes.
And one thing, locking your credit, you do that with Experian, Equifax and Transamerica.
TransUnion, and then there's actually, there's a fourth one called Innovis.
Novus.
Innovis, yeah.
I did that, that was I should have mentioned it when I was telling you about the deal, that was, I learned about that, I think you told me. I went in and I froze all those, it's all three, the big deal, the next time I tried to get credit, I was contacted, I had to go in and unfreeze it for them. And that is invaluable. Because they absolutely can't get to it unless you tell them it's okay. And that was huge.
And it works, and often like when you go to unfreeze it, it says, do you want to unfreeze it permanently or just for a period of time? And I inevitably I'll say, you know, just do it for 3 days, and then I don't have to worry about refreezing it. It'll automatically freeze itself again. So just say.
And the identity monitoring subscriptions, they are worthless. I tried one because I was so worried.
Well, this is what happens is like when your company gets hacked, it says, oh, we'll take care of you. We'll pay for your life, your identity monitoring solutions for a few years, whatever. Worthless. Just, it doesn't do anything for you, just freeze your credit. So, again, people don't know about it because no one's making money on keeping it, but just something that's available to you. So some resources. The first one is, I think, from an individual perspective, just some great links to, this is the US government, CICI.gov, Secure World. If you go on this website, it's got some links, instructions for like some of the stuff we just covered. And this is stuff you can also talk to your family about. And there's also more links about businesses, like, and also, so if you got a small business and you want to see what you can do. This next one is the NIST Cybersecurity Firm 2.0 Quick Start Guide. So a lot of NIST is a big standard in cybersecurity, and a lot of it is maybe kind of more focused on big enterprises. But this is a link right here to say a basic framework for like if you've got a business, like what can you do, right? If you've got a business, you can kind of use this as a starting point. There's links to kind of dive deeper if you want to. But this is a great starting point. It's just a presentation, and it kind of maybe gets you thinking about kind of more holistically what you can do. The last couple of resources, just some podcasts that I like personally. Really want to kind of deep out like on this stuff like I do. Security Now is this guy, Steve Gibson, and he's like one of the big grandfathers of cybersecurity, kind of coined the term spyware. Goes way back. He's been doing this podcast for like, I don't know, 15, 20 years now. But great information there. You can put it on your podcast, or you can go there. He's actually got transcripts of like every podcast, so you can actually use it to search for a term and really kind of dig into it. Darknet Diaries. This is a really great, like, from telling it like a stories about these different events, and they will talk to these, you know, the people that dealt with, even like bad guys will go in there and the former criminals kind of talking about it. So, and it's very, very well told. You really want to kind of get into this, and you can learn a lot more about so Darknet Diaries is great podcast. So now's a part of our talk when we get into discussion or questions, or if anybody's got things that they've experienced I want to share, or ask, you know, whatever you want to get into. So anybody?
Just a suggestion, one thing you didn't cover, and I see this a lot, especially since I have a daughter in her 20s, and what's coming into her teens. Facebook surveys. One of the worst things you can do, because a lot of the questions you think are totally passive, like what was your first car, or, you know, those kind of things. A lot of that they can use to reverse engineer to get the answers to your security questions that you've used in places to try to compromise you as well.
Wow.
And there's There's so many of them that are out there.
What you said, when you said, what is your first car? I went right.
Right.
That is the security question that half the places ask. It's one of the main security. What was your first car?
So let me tell you what I do with these questions, and this, you guys can use this, because a lot of them will use the same questions. What I do is I use my password manager and I'll record the question and I'll make up a totally like wrong answer. And so like your name of your best friend is, growing up was Ebenezer. No one's ever gonna have that, but I'll save that in my password manager, and if I ever need it again, I've got it there, right? So the company doesn't care, they just need the answer, right? So and because you use a password manager, you can record all this stuff, you don't have to remember it, you don't have to keep it all up here, okay? So make up those answers, right?
Or just don't answer the surveys.
Even better,
That's
right? Less is more, don't give it to them in the first place.
They look totally passive, but if you read into the questions, a lot of them could be used to compromise that kind of information.
Right.
And you just think you're answering your survey, well, my sister answered it, or my friend answered it, I'm gonna answer it, you don't realize what you're giving up, when you're doing that.
I don't know if our password manager program or system we use stores our password, key password.
Well, I can only speak for the one I know, which is LastPass. And the reason I know that is because like they talked about it in the security podcast. And this guy who's like a ones and zeros binary, programs in like an assembly kind of guy. He talked with those guys, really kind of got the nuts and bolts of how it actually, the architecture, how it worked. But you can do your research on that. But I would be very careful with that, right? That's a very good question that I would want to, like, if they've got a white paper, like if you go to the website, they can discuss it. I would do like search for reviews or like security review, whatever. And so you'd want to, if you're not using something like, I personally know about LastPass. I know their architecture is good.
What was the question again?
So like I use Dashlane for
And
security.
I've heard that's reputable. I
don't use the passwords in there, but I just make secure notes for all the passwords. So I've got to go in and look it up. Occasionally, like if I don't do the face recognition or whatever, quickly enough, it'll say you got to re-enter your password, master password. And I'm just wondering if I guess you have to do that sometimes too.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if Dashlane, if they got hacked, would somebody have all that? But hopefully they would look for passwords, not secure notes, and have to do all that work.
And especially for your master password, that needs to be like really long. Right.
Okay.
So like when I said 15 characters, that's like for any given website. But if you're putting all your passwords in one spot, like my master password it's more than 30 characters. But there's a thing, I think, I don't remember what it's called, but there's a way like you can generate, it's called the dice list. So if you look at this, basically it's like a list of all these words that you can roll some dice. You can select like, here's these words, and it makes like a super long password that you can actually remember based on words. And then you could sprinkle in a couple like totally random words that you sprinkle in a couple extra things. Like if you can create like a stupid phrase like paperclip alligator, banana fork. You've just made like a super long password. Yeah. That's not my, okay, I should say, that's not my password. But like remember, like length is more important than complexity. You've made, it's a bad guy's job. Like if you had all the computers in the world crunching on that password, it would take them like a million years, right? Just based on the current, like, so making it longer, just make it longer and maybe sprinkle in like one numbers or whatever. You've made it infeasible for someone to just try to brute force your password.
I used to tell folks, use a phrase and put a couple characters in it. And one of the ones I would use as an example, 7 years ago. Everyone knows that on their top of their head, but it's not something we say in our normal everyday life. Add a couple things in there, or use a number 4, or use a couple things. Now you've got a really long password, easy for you to remember, but it doesn't link to relate to you as well.
But
Now,
even
some
better,
of those
just
can be
for-
hacked. I know they're not.
Right, but like I might know something that, if I did enough research on you and you like phrases, maybe I could I might be able to create something that could brute force that.
I'm not saying you couldn't hack it, but That, but that's a
Right.
compromise between easy enough to remember and complicated enough where if they go at it at brute force, it's gonna take them a million years to crack.
If you can just come up with 4 words that are totally random, then, just, I don't know, take a dictionary, flip through a random page, just do this a few times. And you can remember a weird phrase like banana, fork, elevator, escalator. You could write that, and I probably still would write that down, put it in my safe deposit box. So worst case, like, bumps you in the head, it's like, well, at least it's somewhere, right? I haven't lost everything. And that's just some ways you could. Any other comments, questions?
There are also password managers out there like Bitwarden that you can get apps for your iPhone, your Android, whatever, your PC even. And you can actually self-host your Bitwarden password.
Yes, there's a lot of options, like the one I have, like LastPass, there's a free, you can start it for free. It's just, I think the way it's like, it's either not available for your phone, but you can start putting your stuff in there, and then your second factor authentication's options are fewer. They're still good, but it's free, so you can even try it out. Just the way you want to do that, it's like it can be intimidating, like, well, I've got 1,000 websites I want to put in there. What you do it is just the next time you go to that website, you put your password into your password manager, and then you let it change your password. You just like, give me a new password, and it'll say, you want to save it? Yes. And so just next time you do it, and that's how you kind of start legging over into a password manager. And it is recommended by CyberSec. It's a really good way to kind of do that. Create strong passwords that I don't remember 99% of my passwords. I have no idea what they are because I don't need to remember them. I have a password. Anyway, okay. More questions, comments?
One last thing is the things, I know KeyPass does this, and I think I've seen it several places. Talk about the one long password. They will also let you generate a list of long passwords that you can use once. Each of those, in the event you lose that master, that's when you can print, put in the safe deposit box, and actually be able to use it if you need it at a future date.
Good points.
I've heard people talk about VPNs.
Yeah.
What is that,
So-
and can it be used for phone and home?
Yeah, so a VPN, so understand what that is. What is the purpose of a VPN? VPN, first and foremost, is to protect your communications from your device, whether it's your home computer, your phone, and where you're getting, and like your destination, right? So you're gonna go to your bank, right? Say you're at a hotel, like you're on I was just traveling the last few days. I stayed at some of the hotels I stayed at, had Wi-Fi, some that were totally unencrypted, right? Am I gonna want to use that Wi-Fi to go to my bank? No. But if I had a VPN, basically I've anybody who else is on that hotel Wi-Fi, it's gonna, if they could see the traffic coming from my phone or my computer, it would just be complete gibberish. They can't see it. It's not, they don't know they can't see what bank I'm going to. They can't see, it's all encrypted. So it's like a tunnel for information to kind of go through. It doesn't provide any security. It might prevent I guess it could prevent, there's a certain attack called a man-in-the-middle attack. It would prevent that because now it's not something, you can't see into that tunnel. So it does provide some security.
Would it be something that you would use it, like you're getting your internet from Spectrum and the router?
No, it's a great question. Say is my question what is Spectrum is because everybody's monetizing everybody. So they want to collect information everybody. Maybe they want to know what your interests are. And Clay likes, cars and whatever. Well, if they can see what websites you're going to, they can create a dossier on all their customers and sell it. Well, say I don't trust Spectrum. I don't want them selling my information. If I had a VPN, they couldn't do that. That would be a good application.
Yeah, to go with the VPN, might want to separate those out. There's a VPN, NordVPN is one of where they have you go, instead of going direct to a local router in Dallas or linking back to you, they try to put you to another place, bounce you to another place so that it doesn't look, they can't see where you're coming from. that is one way, and that's what, like the NordVPN and some of these, and they're saying they've got these VPNs. But what we're talking about, what Sam's talking about, is a feature of the VPN called point-to-point tunneling protocol. That's the one that you set up that makes that tunnel, that it gives you security, and the man in the middle and the other folks can't get into it. You can set that up for something like your computer here, and have a point-to-point tunneling protocol back to your computer at home. So you can link to that and you can get into your stuff there, but nobody can see that data going back and forth.
Yeah, so there's, to clarify, there's like commercial VPN providers, like what maybe, which you might like, NordVPN. There's a whole bunch, like, and one foot sound like it, if you buy a commercial VPN provider, if there's ones that are out there for free, do not do that. Because all they're doing is basically then they're collecting information, they're selling it, right? So don't do that, right? The whole point of that is that you don't want people selling information. But the bulk point, you can also do something like businesses use, like if you're, any of you work from home and you connect to your business, that's almost certainly a VPN, right? You have an encrypted tunnel from your device straight into your business. That is a point-to-point VPN. You can also do it for yourself. Like if you're out on the road and you want to connect inside your home network, then you can create a VPN to do that. That's if you're more technical in the networking stuff, you can install that. All that's doable. Just, it's a little bit of learning curve to learn how to do that. If that's important to you, if you want to able to access stuff on your network, maybe you want to remote into your cam radio computer and remote in there and use your radio from out on the road. That'd be a great use of a VPN, right? But you don't want to just open up. What you don't want to do is like open up a port on your external router and say like, well, if I go this, I'm touching the computer. Well, just because you can do that, the bad guys are constantly knocking on everybody's internet address. You just don't want to open up ports on your router and allow direct connections to your computer, because that's a great way to get violate all kind of stuff we just talked about, right? So you don't want to do that. But a VPN is a way to do that securely. Good points.
I was in China for 5 months and used the VPN. That was the only way that I could talk to my wife on Facebook, and they got all that blocked.
Yeah.
But I told they couldn't block that.
Well,
They may have, this was in 14 and 15.
yeah,
They probably have it blocked now.
they're blocked or China. The Chinese are among the most sophisticated cyber actors. So it could also be that they didn't block it, but maybe they were monitoring you. You just didn't. They just didn't tell you.
I just tried to get on it.
Yeah, because they don't want their citizens having free information. They want to control, especially now. It's even worse. All right. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question.
Rebecca?
Microsoft has become very aggressive pushing out OneDrive, especially with Windows 11. So do you have any suggestions about that? I feel like I kind of got duped and inadvertently got something on OneDrive that I didn't want there. Because now my documents defaults to OneDrive if you're not keen to that.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure that's kind of more of a specific technical question, how to avoid that. You cannot sign into it. That's the other thing, is if you don't sign into your OneDrive, then you're it's not going to be able to do that. So if you sign out of OneDrive, then it's not going to be. There's also probably like a local on your computer. There's a local folder for OneDrive. So if you ever did connect, it would duplicate it out there. So, but you don't want to save it there. You would just save it in your local documents folder, not the local OneDrive folder. I don't know if that helps.
They try to obfuscate the distinction with Windows 11.
Yeah. I don't expect, like, with their own customers, my expectation is that they're not doing it with the goal of, like, they're not monetizing that. That would be, I think, opening them to like legal consequences. If they were like, especially with, people stuck with their kids, it's like, they don't want that liability. I don't expect that's what's going on. I think what they're trying to do is kind of create, like, how like Internet Explorer Now Edge just comes standard. They want you to, I think the goal is that they want you to natively like just use Microsoft stuff all the time. That's the goal. It's not coming from a monetizing your information perspective. Does that help? But I understand.
Yeah, I understand that. I just don't want my stuff on their cloud at
I-
all.
Yeah, I respect that. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
The hardware firewall better than the software antivirus and everything? Like
It's not an either or, they're doing different things, right? If you're thinking about your attack surface, they're dealing with a different part of the threat. Just your home router is already kind of like a good thing, right? If you, basically it's just blocking everything by default and it's allowing, stuff that goes out. If you're requesting something, it allows stuff to go out and then come back in. It's called like a stateful, what's the word? But it's not allowing stuff just coming in from the outside. So, oh, by the way, it's not a bad idea to every so often just hit the reset button on your Wi-Fi router. Because those things can get compromised too. And just the very simple act of just hitting that reset button, well, it doesn't necessarily prevent the bad guys from getting it back in, but they have to start all over again. So just tap that reset button can help. And if you got your own like router, do updates. That's also, people forget about their networking stuff. Update your networking infrastructure.
And there's some routers that have more features, right? Like that have with the WST something. Some routers work on a different firmware that you can increase your security with.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
limit traffic per application or something.
Sure. Yeah, and there's one of the kind of cool things you can do too is you just look up something called Pi-hole.
Oh, yeah.
Pi-hole is like, just get a Raspberry Pi, you put this free software on it. Basically what it does is that you point all your systems, like when it says go to the internet, instead of like pointing it at your router, you can point it, the gateway, point everything to is the Raspberry Pi. And it says like, okay, give me, say for instance, you want to block Facebook. You type in Facebook and it goes to the Raspberry Pi instead of your router and out to the internet. It says, give me the address for Facebook. And it says, I don't know. It just drops that request. But it also works really good for bad domains, right? It says, okay, you've got a link that says go to some bad website and download stuff, and that request goes to your Pi-hole and says, give me this website. I was like, sorry, I'm not going to give you that because it's on my list of bad stuff. I'm just not going to give it to you. That's a fun project if you ever want to get, it's not super hard. But there's also devices that will do something like hardware firewall, where you do something similar, like PF Sense is one. It's also free software. You can put a computer basically bridging your internet. It's a bit more involved technically, but these are things you can do to kind of also increase your security. That's higher up on the difficulty, but it's still.
You can make your cable, your router that you get from Verizon or whatever, you can basically make that into just a gateway, and then you can put a router behind it, and you can spend $50 on a router or $50,000 on a router, and they will obviously do different and better things, and somewhere in the middle, $200, $300, $400, you can get some very sophisticated capabilities in those routers, and they will do a lot of stuff. And what a router does for you, and by the way, the one from Verizon isn't a bad router overall. It'll do quite a bit of stuff, but it protects your everything behind it. So all the computers in your house are being protected to some extent by that router. If you lock it down pretty well, it's going to keep your stuff safe, except when they go out and say, I want something, then that opens a hole they can come back in.
The way to kind of think about it, you're giving you a lot of resources, a lot of things to think about. And I understand everybody's got a life, there's this whole balance of affecting cybersecurity, the level of security against convenience, right? There's a balancing act, and everybody has to make up their own mind about where they draw that line, what are their priorities, right? And if you're, the more you want to focus on that security aspect, you've got resources here to help you realize that goal, right? If you really want to kind of push this, or especially if something's happened to you, you're like, okay, I need to do a few things, and hopefully we give you some resources to look at there. And if you do implement some of these things like a router, keep in mind all that stuff has to be maintained, right? So it's easy to kind of set that up, but 3 months, 6 months down the road, when you're like, oh, I got to go in there, I got to gotta update that thing, and it's like, oh, I got other stuff to do, right? So just balance that out. You just can't like get some type of silver, buy something as a silver bullet, you put it in your system and forget about it. Because if you don't update that, then you've got the same problem we talked about before about what happens when you don't update stuff, right? Bad guys can take advantage. Okay, any other questions? All right.
Do that again, please.
That's for fun. Yes.
All right.